And I started thinking, well, if I were in their seat, what would I do? As opposed to, here's the role that I have and that I should play. And all of a sudden, it opened up my mind where I started seeing things very differently. I started seeing things like, oh, wait, the impact is not just about me. It's what about the impact on customers, on partners, on the media, on internal systems, on pricing and packaging and analysts. And my mindset just expanded significantly.
Ciao, io sono Marco Imperato e ti do il benvenuto su Product Heroes. Product Heroes è il punto di riferimento in Italia per il product management. Finora abbiamo aiutato più di 200.000 persone tramite master, formazioni in azienda, guide, articoli e meetup. Ogni anno organizziamo una delle più grandi product conference in Europa con oltre 1.000 persone. Ti aiutiamo anche attraverso questo canale in cui intervisto product leader che spaccano e che potranno darti tantissimi consigli utili per migliorare il tuo modo di costruire, lanciare e muovere le metriche del tuo prodotto. Ospite dell'episodio di oggi è Francois Ajenstat, che è CPO in Amplitude. François ha condiviso con noi la sua incredibile esperienza, dagli inizi come ingegnere, passando da Microsoft, fino al ruolo di CPO in aziende tech di successo come Tableau, da startup alla quotazione sul Nasdaq e alla successiva acquisizione da parte di Salesforce, e oggi in Amplitude. Con lui abbiamo parlato di disruption, di come affrontare il cambiamento e di come adattarsi per crescere nel mondo del prodotto. Ecco 5 cose che imparerai ascoltando l'episodio di oggi. 1. Disruption, quindi come reinventare il tuo prodotto può di fatto aiutarlo a crescere. 2. Come guidare il cambiamento del tuo prodotto grazie ai why. 3. Come mantenere il focus sulla mission grazie al potere dei no. Questo è difficilissimo. 4. Come diventare un CPO di successo seguendo la filosofia del act as if. 5. Come il continuous learning sia un elemento determinante per guidare la crescita di ogni azienda. Ciao François, welcome to Product Heroes.
Thank you for having me, Marco. So delighted to be here.
So what time is there? Where are you based?
I'm in the west coast of the US. It's 7 a.m. It is completely dark outside, but it is so bright in this room.
Perfect. So thank you very much for being here. So who is Francois Ajenstat? Right now, Francois is Chief Product Officer at Amplitude. And so he's leading the product management, design, and growth teams across the whole organization. Prior to Amplitude, he led Tableau's product management for 13 years, starting from a very small group of people, small startup, to a publicly traded company, and then being acquired by Salesforce. So it's been a very long journey. And so the first question is, what's your journey? How can I become Francois Ajenstat? If I have to start right now.
I don't want anybody to become me, but I'll say that, I haven't had necessarily the most conventional growth career, but if I kind of work backwards, the last year I joined Amplitude as the Chief Product Officer, and it's just been really amazing because, we're using data to help other builders like me build better products. So in a way, I get to build products for people like me. Like I get to build products for me and help other people learn and grow. And it's just been incredible. Prior to that, I was at Tableau. When I started, there was only 150 people in the company. I was the first product manager hired. And, at that time, Tableau wasn't as well known as it was today. It was Taboo. But starting in the company and being the first one in the discipline, you kind of had to invent what product management was because there was no expectations of what was required. And so you just found problems and you built it. And what was interesting through that journey is we went from little startup to hyper growth and eventually becoming a public company. And then hyper growth again. We had a crash, we rebuilt, we changed the business model, we got acquired, we got integrated. So while it was 13 years in total, it felt like 5 or 6 different really important milestones or different companies at that time where you had to reinvent everything and rethink it all. And that was really the driving and the exciting part. And then prior to that, I was at Microsoft for a decade in the developer evangelism team, in the SQL Server team. I led product management for SQL Server, led product management for the Office team in Excel and Access. And I was at a company called Cognos, and then a Star before that. So I started as an engineer that grew into an evangelist, that grew into a product manager, and eventually became a chief product manager.
Long journey. So today we are gonna talk about disruption. So when we have our very first chat a few weeks ago, you were telling me, okay, we can talk about disruption in three main fields: career, industry, and company. But when I was hearing your journey at Tableau, I was asking myself, being an entrepreneur, how do you keep changing without driving people nuts? So giving right context all the time and see change as a positive aspect of innovation instead of a bad thing.
Well, look, if you're going to be in technology, the only constant is change. And so I think everybody in our space has to be comfortable with change. And the reality is that the more successful you are, the more change you're going to have. And so get really comfortable with it, because at every phase of growth, everything breaks and you have to reinvent and rebuild along the way. I think there's two big pieces of advice that I would have for managing that change. The first one is be very clear as to what problems you're trying to solve. Sometimes you might call it the mission orientation. You know where you're trying to go. There might be hurdles along the way, but you at least know the destination. You know what problems, you know what's your mission. I think that's thing one. Thing two is, I think a lot of people get really, really attached to the past, when really, as builders, you need to be in love with the future. You need to continuously dream about what could be, not what was. And I think those two things, right? Knowing that this is the mission and here's how we can make it dramatically better, they help you navigate all of the changes that happen, whether they're internal changes, external changes, or whatever they might be. And the constant in all that to me is the focus on the customer. You have to go deep on the customer, right? You have to really understand that customer, because they will guide you along the way.
You said one very interesting thing regarding the past. So my next question is, just because as a PM, one of major responsibilities it's a strange job, because you have all the ownership, but basically you have authority on very few people. So you have to be able to influence people in a better way. So how do you manage this attachment to the past in most of the people? I mean, it happens, no? Why we are changing? So the past was better. I don't know what to expect. It's gonna be too risky. So how you are able to give the right context and make people to understand why you have to change, so without making them scary?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said the key word, which is you have to connect them with the why. And you also have to kind of get them to understand the context. I think a lot of times we are quick to jump to solution, and we're quick to telling people this is what needs to happen. But actually setting the context and describing the why we're going down this path, the more you'll bring the team along. Because at the end of the day, you have to bring the team, and you have to kind of explain, what the reasons are that you're doing these things. Sometimes you're doing things that are very exciting. Sometimes you're doing things that are very boring but necessary. But there's always an important why behind it, and anchoring on that. There's another aspect I think that people also are eager to hear, but I think we do a bad job in product, which is to talk about the trade-offs. What did you say yes to versus what you said no to? And it's easy to talk about the yeses, but they always want to hear about the nos. And one of the things that we were proud of when I was at Tableau is I would say no 7 out of 8 times. Was it exactly 7 out of 8? Not exactly, but it's a nice way of describing it. But it was really important because we said, look, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing this. And we chose to do this over these other things. And I would say this all the time with customers. You ask for a feature. I'm sorry, that's not what we're focused on this year. We're going here. And they appreciate it. They loved it because you were clear as to where you were going and why. So you got to just be really comfortable describing the no's, the context, and obviously the why.
So I was asking how to say no, but actually you already replied. So the answer is to give the right context and explaining why you're saying no.
Correct. And sometimes we love to please people. In product, we love to please our customers or our team members, etc. It's really easy to say yes. But being able to be clear that there's a no, like we would love to do this, but these are the trade-offs that we're dealing with. Or we'd love to do this, but this year our priority is XYZ. It helps tremendously.
Talking about disruption, what's your personal definition of disruption?
For me, disruption is just not necessarily accepting the status quo, but reinventing what you want things to be. So we always, I think a lot of times we like to complain about things and we like to complain about different things. And for me, it's just don't accept what it is. Just go create what you want it to be. And so whether you're thinking about disrupting your career or your industry or your product, just start imagining if you fixed all these problems, what would it look like? And just disrupt it. Just go down a different path. Don't keep on the same hamster wheel over and over again. Like find a new, hamster wheel or new ride to go on.
But how did you actually disrupt your career? What path did you take?
Yeah, I think for me, when I thought about my career, as I mentioned before, I was an engineer, not a very good engineer, but I was an engineer. And what I started thinking about was, how can I help other people understand what my code was supposed to do as opposed to what it actually did, and going down that path. And at one point, I joined Microsoft. I was an evangelist. And I was asked to present in a meeting with some of the most senior executives in the company. I was very young in my career, and there's these very established leaders that are out there. And I started thinking, well, if I were in their seat, what would I do? As opposed to, here's the role that I have and that I should play. And all of a sudden, it opened up my mind where I started seeing things very differently. I started seeing things like, oh, wait, the impact is not just about me. It's what about the impact on customers, on partners, on the media, on internal systems, on pricing and packaging and analysts. And my mindset just expanded significantly. And so, A, I changed my viewpoint of the world. And B, when I did that, I started seeing problems that I didn't envision. And I started chasing those problems. And that's literally how I got every single promotion. I never asked for one promotion in my career. 0. I always said, if I had that next job, how would I act? So I said, I'll act as if I had that next job. And I just started doing things. And all of a sudden, I started being pulled into more strategic meetings, more higher profile opportunities. And it just became natural.
This is a super interesting framing because it happened all the time by working with different kind of people, being asked, can I become, can I do? And so the answer for being a manager could be, okay, what would you do? That's right.
And then why aren't you doing that now?
Why are you doing that now?
So I'll tell you, when I went from an IC, or individual contributor PM, to a manager PM, it happened very naturally. I started doing my job. Great. And I started building best practices, or I started building examples for others to use. I started coaching other people. They were coming to me when my manager wasn't around. They would come to me
Okay.
for counsel. I would go in and provide a viewpoint that was not just mine, but would encompass the others. I started acting as if. And what happened was I became the proxy for my manager. So when my manager wasn't available, I was acting as if I was him as proxy. And eventually, he ended up leaving the company, and they said, "Well, who's the person that should take that job?"
Obvious.
And I was already doing the job, so it was just a natural transition. It was the same thing at every phase of my career.
Cool. What was the next step? So after you became a manager or other product manager, what did you think you were missing? And so next step.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of times people chase titles or levels. And I think that's a fool's errand. The thing to chase are experiences, right? And opportunities for growth. And so those I think are really, really important because look, I grew my career at Microsoft. I was there for 10 years, was one of the earliest directors in the company or youngest directors in the company. Like great success, could have continued on my career. But I felt I needed to disrupt myself again. I needed to find new experiences. I knew what it was like in a very large company. But what if I didn't have the resources of a large company? Would I still be successful? What if I didn't have all of the branding power of a Microsoft, but I had to go create it? Would I still be successful? I didn't know. And so I said, okay, let me go and disrupt everything again and go to this company that quite frankly may not have succeeded. And I said, let me go chase that experience. Because if I have that experience in my tool belt, well, then I'd have big company experience, small company experience. I'd have large product, small product, growth and declining, whatever it is. And that creates the foundation that you can build on for the future.
What was your biggest threat during this disruption? So disrupting something means reinventing something. So obviously taking risks. So when was the time in which you were thinking, okay, I'm fucked, I'm done, I cannot move on anymore?
I didn't use the F word. I use the F word all the time. Where it was is when I became, I don't want to say bored, but I felt I was on autopilot. That's when I know myself that it's time to drive a change and it's time to blow it all up again. And because when you're on autopilot, you're just you're doing what you expect. You're not growing, you're not changing. And it's time to shake things up and make that happen. A lot of people ask me, how did you stay at Tableau for 13 years? It's no longer a startup. It's this. Most people don't stay across all these phases. It's really, really hard. But again, I chase experiences. I was looking for impact. I was looking for growth. And at every phase, there was something new to learn. And so I felt I could continue to contribute. And it's not to say that my last year at Tableau was not one where they continued to grow. Tableau is now a $3 billion business. It's amazing. I just felt that for me personally, I was on repeat. And so, all right, let's go blow it up again.
What was your most difficult challenge, most difficult time? The biggest, or the hardest, even if it wasn't so big?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's one moment that just came up in my my head, which is this was 2016. Yeah, it was 2016. So Tableau was extremely successful. We were growing and growing and growing. We were on top of the world, growing over 60, 80% year over year. Amazing. And then in the summer of 2015, Microsoft introduced Power BI, which was basically a Tableau competitor that they put in the box with Office. At the same time, Salesforce introduced Wave. Amazon introduced QuickSight. ClickView, or direct competitor, introduced a version for free. The whole market just came after us. And our stock, and we ended up growing, we were growing very fast. And then our stock, our growth went down to about 45%. And our stock declined 50% in one day.
Wow.
50%. It was one of the largest stock declines in history. And so here we are, we're building a company, and all of a sudden, it feels like the world is ending. Our growth is slowing down. There's more competition, bigger competition. Our stock is declining. People are like, we're dead. All the articles out there were dead company walking. Great. They were a flash in the pan, right? It was the end of Tableau. And you could feel the energy go down, and the doubt was through the roof. And there's two ways that you can take that. You can say it like, oh my God, we're defeated. Let's go home and let's pack up. Or you could really take it as a source of energy and say, okay, well, wait, why do people choose us? What are our differentiators? What can we lean into to drive growth? It's a long story short, but in this phase is tremendous industry change phase for ourselves, for a company. That hard moment made everybody doubt every single thing, every decision, every strategy was wrong. Every person was wrong. Every person was bad. And so you had to go lift up not only yourself, but you had to go lift up every other employee. You had to also convince your customers and your community that no, we're not a dead company. Look at the innovation. Yeah, it's hard, but it's on your shoulders. And that just emotionally is hard. And we did that, and we turned around, and eventually we didn't die. We continued to grow. We continued to innovate, but it's under very different contexts.
I think should be super strange to work as a manager, as a CPO in a publicly traded company, because it's like you have two different realities. The one that in which I invest a lot on industry in the Nasdaq, and basically sometimes you have plus 25%, minus 30%, where nothing actually is changing. So I'm trying to think what the CPO is thinking. While nothing is changing, the stock is down 30%. So you have to take all this ownership for something that actually didn't happen, because nothing changed in your product, in your customer base. It was just, PR or news or competition. So it should be super challenging by a psychological point of view, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard. And, best advice is not to look at the stock at all, not to focus on the short term and really think long term. That's the best advice. And yes, it's easy to say, but the reality is when those things happen, you look, or your friends send you a news article saying, is this true? So that is hard. But if you truly do believe in the direction and you believe those are the right things, the day-to-day ups and downs, you'll be able to go through it. But it's not easy. As a leader, you have to really lead from the front and truly reconnect to saying, this is why we believe. And you also have to be, I think, very good at saying, we made a bet, it didn't pay off, but this is what we learned, and this is what we're going to do different in the future.
Well, Francois, how did you learn? It's a strange question. How did you learn to become a chief product officer? Because obviously there isn't a master degree, an MBA, or you learn on the field, in the trenches. But
yeah.
How does it work? So how does your work change after you become a CPO?
Whether you're CPO or director or manager or whatever, for me, an interesting thing is the work didn't change, because I was already acting as if I was already working at what I believe was that level and thinking about it differently. What really changed was other people's perceptions of me. And that actually was probably the thing I was most unexpected about. I didn't change, but my title changed. And therefore, people's impressions of me all of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's the chief. Or, oh, I'm going to question this. Or, oh, it's this. And that actually took me many years to realize that I was on a different, there was a different view of what my responsibilities are, how I had to show up, how I had to think through things, and what people expected of me was different.
This is a super interesting point of view. I never thought about it because, as you were saying, you were already doing the job. This is why probably they chose you.
Correct.
But actually, people expectation changed a lot, and so they gave you pressure, expectations, maybe higher results, maybe different behaviors from you.
Correct. It is the really interesting thing, especially if you think about somebody's career. You think of what do I need to do at the next level? You often forget what do other people need from you when you're at that level, or expect from you, or treat you when you're at that level. And again, it is the unexpected aspect that a company is an organism, right? There's all these little pieces that work together. And so how you fit and how you grow is really, really important. And the more senior you get, the more impacts you have on many, many more people and many, many more decisions that come across.
And what do stakeholders expect from a CPO in a large, like in a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company? A couple of things.
I mean, really simply, they want clarity on strategy. What is the winning product strategy? Number one. They want clarity in terms of where growth will come from. How will you product drive growth? I think they want a leader who can help execute and drive results. Because it's one thing to have the strategy, but if you can't execute it, who cares? So execution and results matter a lot. And I think that they want also somebody who can communicate very clearly to all stakeholders what we're doing and why. And all stakeholders includes employees, engineering, sales. It means customers. It means analysts. It means investors. It means partners. Like, you have to become incredibly good at communication, connection, and engagement. But I think those are kind of some of the things that are there. Obviously, strategy, but you have to be able to execute, you have to be able to deliver, and you have to be able to bring people along.
What's your personal definition of strategy? Because everyone, want to deal with strategy. I'm a strategist. I'm gonna do the strategy. But everyone is I think 99% of people are very confused about strategy. There is a super interesting book, pretty sure, that is Bad Strategy, Good Strategy.
Yeah.
What's your personal take on strategy?
It's hard because I agree with you. Like, in a way, strategy is nothing, right? It means whatever you want it to mean. For me, strategy is just having clarity about the what and the why. That's really what it is. Here is the context. Here's why we're trying to go down this area, and what will happen if we do it, and what trade-offs you've made. A very simple thing is to say a strategy is not what you say yes to; it's what you say no to. But at the end of the day, it's the what and the why.
Then a stupid question: do you think is more important execution or strategy? If you had to choose one.
I hate to choose. I live in. I hate the tyranny of or. I hate saying one or the other. I think it's an and. If you have great strategy and terrible execution, you have nothing. Right? I actually think execution matters more than strategy, candidly. And you may not have the best strategy, but if you have the best execution, you can outrun and you can outlearn everybody else.
You constantly repeat the word learning, and to me it's super interesting because you are a very experienced guy in the industry, but you are so humble to repeat learning is the most important thing. One thing that I struggle with is to kind of persuade junior people, because usually very experienced people, they have learning in mind, the growth mindset. While junior people suddenly, when they have 3-4 years experience, they think they are okay, I'm done. How can you reinforce a learning loop in junior people?
Well, I'll first repeat 3 quotes from 3 leaders. The first one I learned from Mark Benioff at Salesforce. He really instilled this idea of a beginner's mind. Really taking everything with a beginner's mindset. Ignore all your experience, bring a beginner's mind to every problem, and ask a lot of questions, keep learning, keep growing. I think that's how Salesforce has continued to grow and innovate while they become a massive company. The second one is I love the Amazon mindset of the day one mentality. Everybody at Amazon, they show up every day as though it's their first day on the job. You know nothing. And so you're constantly thinking of, wait, what do I need to learn today? Because it's your first day on the job. You have that energy, you have that passion, you have, everything that's in front of you is brand new. That's a great mindset. And then Satya Nadella at Microsoft said, when they transitioned from the old to the new, he said, we need to transition from being know-it-alls to learn-it-alls. And I love that quote because it really means that you're not saying we're smarter than you. You just assume I just constantly want to learn and grow and, be curious. And so that I think is actually like they're 3 great examples of 3 great companies where they've instilled that in the culture. What I do is I just ask people questions, right? I want them to keep questioning and I want them to keep, debating. And some of the ways of doing that is, again, being curious. The more questions you ask, right? It's about the quality of your questions, but it's also just truly caring. Who are the customers about this? Oh, wait, you didn't talk to the customers? Wait, well, you probably should. Okay, like, why do they want that? Oh my God, that's amazing. What would it do if we did it right? What trade-offs would we have? Like, you start going that way and you don't assume, put it on the table.
Talking about industry disruption, can you give us some examples, some things you faced during your journey, or some disruptions you actually made during your journey?
Yeah, I mean, we've all gone through lots of different, depending on where you are in your career, we've gone through lots of disruptions. There was a dot-com crash at one moment, but we faced the on-prem to cloud disruption, the mobile disruption, right? Before the iPhone, everything was on the web, and then mobile came along, changed everything. Now we're facing the AI disruption or the AI boom, depending on how you look at it. And all those are like massive industry, right, changes. But I think there's also like more micro or more localized disruptions. When I think about Tableau as an example, um, at the time, the leaders in the business intelligence space were companies like Business Objects, Cognos, MicroStrategy, Oracle, Hyperion. All of those were the leaders, all multi-billion dollar companies. And here's this little company called Tableau getting started with a different point of view. What was interesting about Tableau is that if you actually talk to customers in the business intelligence space and you said, hey, tell me about your problems, they would tell you, well, my problems are I need to produce reports for the business and it's challenging. I need governance. I need this. I need that. What Tableau did differently is instead of asking the customers directly about their pains, they like we followed the next phase. Because if you follow jobs to be done, you would have said, oh, okay, BI is about IT delivering reports for the business. So let's go make IT's job better. And what Tableau did was, wait, why do we even have IT? If the actual end users is the business, let's go solve it for the business. So what do they need? And so the disruption was actually changing the players in the game, right, from IT to business led. And so while the BI market was still the same problem, it was still everything. The fact that you changed the actor completely upended the market. So we disintermediated the role of IT, but we changed the role of IT to something different by empowering the business users. Completely, unorthodox, not the way you would follow it, but that's how you found that disruption.
How do you see the future of the industry of, let's say, analytics? Talking about AI and all the super quick evolution that you are foreseeing in the industry.
Well, I see a world where data is just part of everybody's job. Data is like a Word document or a spreadsheet. It is just something that everybody does. It's a core part of their jobs. And so I think there's a real trend around data democratization and data culture. More people will have data skills and more people will be data curious. And it's going to be an expectation of every single person's job. What is changing is the modality, the way in which people are going to engage with it. And that AI will actually remove some of the boring stuff by bringing insights and helping people be smarter. It's not about removing the human. I think it's augmenting the human and finding those insights for you automatically. I think that becomes really, really key. So there's a democratization play, but to do that, you have to continuously raise the bar of technology so it becomes more approachable. While, if you think about parallels in the industry, 30, 40 years ago, there was no word processing or spreadsheets that were commonplace. Those were specialized jobs by specialists in the market. And what Word Perfect, now Google Docs has really done is democratized access to it. There are still professional writers, but now everybody's able to communicate. And I think it's going to be the same thing in data, where everybody will have access to data. There'll still be data scientists and analysts, but they will have more powerful tools, and everybody else will be able to ask the question themselves.
Now, talking about your, current company, Amplitude. So there is one question coming from the community by Nicola Pacini, who's a friend, actually. So how do they, talking about Amplitude, face the technological challenge to keep a very good customer experience against potential high cost of infrastructure?
It's a really good question because many times as product leaders, we always think about the product capabilities to deliver. Actually, there's a lot of things behind the scenes, whether it's dealing with technical debt, improving efficiencies so that you reduce your costs, all of that. I don't think of it as an either or. I think of it as an and. And for that particular question, what I'm asking is really, how does the capabilities I'm delivering deliver 10 to 100 times more value? So if in this case, the capabilities has a high cost, will it deliver unreal growth, like 10x growth? If it does, I'll take the cost and I'll optimize it in the future. Sometimes we pre-optimize, with a fear mindset. I'd rather have a growth mindset and then deal with the optimization afterwards. But if you believe in the bet, lean into that bet and just go.
I have a question regarding your reply. So how do you manage this trade-off? So betting on the bet, or growth mindset in which you start from the customer experimenting, and if we're doing this job for years, that is not always as lean startups or MVP or discovery. Sometimes you trust your guts and go. and move on. So how do you manage this? How have you managed on real examples?
I mean, look, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of, you know, optimizing for the current versus optimizing for the future. One of the tools that I used was there's this great book called Zone to Win. And Zone to Win was really kind of designed to think about how companies can create structures based on the maturity of the business. So if you have a very mature business, like Amplitude is an example, our core analytics business, it's very mature. We have thousands of customers, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for that. How we think about that has to be different than protecting more transformational bets or innovative bets that have a longer payoff. And so you just want to have a balance in your portfolio where it can't be 100% on the current, and it can't be 100% on transformation. It's just really thinking about that short-term versus long-term trade-off. So as a concrete example, at Amplitude, our core digital analytics business, very large, very good, but I'm protecting a portion of it, right? A portion of my resources to build, our next products, whether that's our experimentation products, our session replay products, our guides and survey products, like all of that. I've kind of almost ring fenced those resources to give them enough oxygen and space to innovate. But again, if I could take that resource, put it on the left and put it on the right. And of course, on the right, you'll get maybe outsized returns, but hopefully the two of these things will work in concert and actually lift everybody up together.
Okay, so in our very first meeting, you said something that struck me. It was like, care deeply about the outcome, not your ego. It's very easy to understand why, but how do you do that in a day-to-day, in your day-to-day activities or managing relationships with your colleagues, stakeholders, customers, and how do you make people to embrace this culture?
So I like that you connected with that statement. What I tell people all the time is I just tell them care less. Don't give a fuck, basically, right? And the reason I say that is I think a lot of people are self-censoring themselves and creating limits on their potential because they're afraid. They're afraid of asking dumb questions. They're afraid of looking stupid in the meeting. They're afraid of showing up unprepared. They're afraid of something. And a lot of times that's on us. It's a me problem. And so the way to kind of like break that in is like care less about you, care more about the outcome, care more about the problem, care more about the customer. And what's the worst thing that'll happen? Like, okay, you get fired, or nobody wants to get fired, but like you look stupid in the meeting, fine, okay, whatever. But you've at least said your point of view. You've cared about the thing. And that I think is the real thing. So you got to check your ego at the door. Just have no ego or limited ego. Be curious. That means be comfortable asking dumb questions, but really focus on what matters. Just not necessarily the process. It's not necessarily, how beautiful your slides were, although that's important sometimes. It's really about, are you solving the problems in the best way possible? And if you do that, then you're fine. I sometimes say the truth will set you free. If you truly believe it, you'll be fine in the end.
I think one of the limitations you listen that prevent people to grow is simply saying, I don't know, in a meeting, because there is this strange assumption in which if you are a manager, you have to have all the answers. And so instead of listening, instead of asking questions, instead of being curious and then going to the very crucial point of the problem, you're thinking about the answer and to answer very fast, so to be the smarter people in the room. How do you see that?
I mean, I'll take Satya Nadella's quote from earlier. Don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And so that means that if you don't have to know it all. And say, oh, I don't know, I'll go find the answer. I don't know, what do you think? What about this? Have you just be curious. And again, it sets you free. So, but why are people so afraid of not knowing? Sometimes not knowing is because you haven't done your preparation. Like if you haven't done the prep work, then that's on you. But if it's truly you don't know, then you just say it. Here's how I would think about the problem, or here's how I would go approach discovering the answer. What do you think about that? And it's amazing how just saying that, or thinking through it with others, actually pulls them into the solution. It's liberating.
Exactly. So the last two questions, they're always the same for all our guests. First one, what was your biggest mistake? So the mistake from which you learned a lot, really a lot.
I mean, the biggest, it's not the mistake, but the situation where I learned the most was the one I described earlier, where we were growing, our stock dropped 50%, and we had a crisis of leadership, crisis of confidence, crisis of everything. I think those moments where things dramatically change is where I learned the most. When Salesforce decided to acquire Tableau, was this moment like, oh my God, everything's going to change. We're no longer an independent company. We're going to be part of this bigger company. And my attitude in all those scenarios is, rather than being scared of it, I just lean in. The people who really leaned into the change, who really leaned into the acquisition or whatever that is, actually ended up growing 10 times faster than those who were afraid and just like were reticent of the change. So that, like, to me, there's been so many of those moments through the career that I just think, you take those moments and I just lean.
Last question. Let's say I am 23 years old. I'm a developer or a marketer or a designer. I watched this podcast with you. I fall in love with the job.
Amazing.
And I want to become a product manager. And you can tell me just one advice. Which is it?
The same advice I tell everybody: act as if. So you're a developer. All right. If I were to make you a product manager tomorrow, what would you do? Would you write a PRD? Would you go interview customers? Would you, start thinking about designs? What would you do? Okay, do that right now. Don't wait for the job. Start doing the job. Start acting as if now. And what will happen is, if you want that job, say in your current company, guess what? You'll be acting as if. And then when the job opens up, they'll say, who would be the best person to take this role?
Obviously.
That person. But you're learning, you're growing, you're doing, you're experimenting, you're developing, you're growing, you're doing all these great things. So act as if, and great things will come out of it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Francois.
Thank you, Marco. And we started in the dark. The sun has risen. Our careers have grown. I really appreciate the discussion. It's been really, really fun.
Thank you very much. I learned a lot. I would act as if on every new challenge. And we would like to see you in Italy soon.
That would be incredible. Love Italy.
Ciao, Francois. Thank you very much. Have a great
Ciao,
day.
grazie mille.
Grazie per aver ascoltato questo episodio di Product Heroes. Se l'hai trovato utile, iscriviti su YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, insomma, dove ascolti i tuoi podcast normalmente, così non ti perderai neanche un episodio. Prima di andare via, vota con 5 stelline questo podcast o scrivi un commento, una recensione. Questo ci aiuterà a raggiungere sempre più persone e quindi aumentare la diffusione della cultura di prodotto in Italia, che poi è la nostra mission finale. Quindi il podcast è soltanto uno dei tanti modi che Product Heroes utilizza per spingere la cultura di prodotti. Trovi maggiori informazioni e tutte le attività che svolgiamo su prodottheroes.it. Ciao e alla prossima!